They say blood dries fast. They lie. It was just past 2 a.m. when my van rattled to a stop outside the St. Agatha Orphanage, an old red brick building buried in the dead end of 7 Mile Road. The city forgot about this place years ago. No one comes here. No kids. No priests. Just stray cats and shadows that watch too long. I stepped out into the cold. My breath came out in puffs, but the air smelled warm. Rotten warm, like copper and something older. I grabbed my gear from the back: gloves, suit, solvent kit, UV lamp, camera. The usual. My boots crunched over shattered glass and dried leaves as I pushed through the iron gates that hung half off their hinges. The front door was cracked open. Not broken. Not kicked in. Just waiting. Inside, the air was heavy, like it hadn't moved in years. Moonlight slipped through stained glass windows, painting colored shapes across the floor. It looked peaceful, until I saw the drag marks. Thick, dark lines stretched across the marble, like someone had been pulled, not walked. No police tape. No markers. Just a thin smell of bleach trying to cover something that didn't want to be hidden. I flipped on my UV lamp. Blood. Splashed across the floor. Sprayed against the far wall. And not in the usual panic patterns. This was organized, too clean. Circular. Precise. I knelt down and placed a gloved finger on one of the outer lines. Still wet. That's when the lights flickered. I looked up, thinking maybe the power was reacting to me walking through. But the chandelier above didn't just flicker, it swayed. Side to side. No wind. No draft. Just that slow, deliberate swing. I kept working. That's what you do. You clean. You document. You leave. Whatever mess came before isn't your business. That's the rule. But then I saw it. In the center of the blood circle, surrounded by melted candle stubs and scorch marks, was a photo. Burned around the edges, curled and yellowed. I picked it up carefully. My breath caught in my throat. It was Claire. Younger. Maybe 12 or 13. Standing in front of this very orphanage. Her face was the same, but her eyes, they weren't. There was something distant in them. Like she was already somewhere else. Behind her stood a tall man in black, hand on her shoulder. His face was smudged out. On purpose. I staggered back, nearly dropping the photo. That was impossible. Claire never mentioned this place. Ever. And she'd been gone 11 years. I scanned the room again. My head was buzzing now. Behind the blood. Beneath the scent of rot and wax. I felt watched. And then I heard it. A whisper. Faint. Like it came from behind the walls. John. I froze. My name. Spoken in a voice I knew like the back of my hand. Claire. I turned, scanning every corner. Nothing. Just shadows dancing in the corners and my own shaky breath. I backed toward the exit, heart pounding, trying not to let the fear take over. But as I reached the door, I noticed something new carved into the wood just above the handle. A symbol. It hadn't been there before. It was the same one burned into the walls of our old apartment the night she died. I touched it gently, and something inside the walls laughed. Not loudly. Not human. A dry, ancient sound. Like a throat filled with ash. I dropped the photo, grabbed my gear, and ran to the van. This job was supposed to be another cleanup. But I knew now. It was a message. And it wasn't meant for the police. It was meant for me. I got home that night, long after midnight, still smelling of rot and cheap incense. My boots left faint prints of dried gore on the kitchen tiles, but I didn't bother scrubbing them off. What was the point? I've cleaned up worse. At least, I thought I had. I dropped my gear by the door, rubber gloves, hazmat suit, bleach bottle, and pulled the evidence sample from my coat pocket. A small glass vial filled with a thick, dark smear. Blood from the orphanage. But it wasn't ordinary blood. It shimmered under certain lights, like oil floating on water. And when I'd tried wiping it with a basic solvent, it hissed. Actually hissed. I sat down at my basement workstation. A rusted table lamp buzzed overhead, casting a yellow glow across the clutter. Burnt Bibles, melted crucifixes, sealed evidence bags, and tools I'd stolen from scenes no one would dare revisit. I opened the vial carefully and dipped a clean swab into the substance. The moment it touched the silver testing strip, the strip turned black. Not dark black. As if it had been scorched by fire. A sharp sting filled my nostrils, and for a second, I thought I saw something move in the shadows behind me. I turned quickly, heart racing. Nothing. I looked back down at the swab. The blood had vanished. I leaned forward, hands shaking slightly. I repeated the test, this time with ammonia. Same result. The blood reacted like it was alive, like it knew what I was doing. I scribbled in my old logbook. Sample number 77. Blood resists cleaning agents. Reacts to silver. Vanishes after exposure. Smell, sulfur copper rot. Possible ritual origin. As soon as I finished writing, there was a knock at my door. 3 slow taps. Then silence. I froze. No one ever knocks at my door. Not at this hour. Not in this neighborhood. The last time someone did, it was my supervisor delivering a case file. That was 3 years ago. He died in a car crash 2 days later. I climbed the stairs cautiously, grabbing the crowbar I kept beside the fridge. When I peeked through the peephole, no one was there. But something was a package. Plain. Wrapped in old brown paper and sealed with black string. No return address. No name. I opened the door, snatched the box, and slammed it shut. Back in the basement, I set the box on the work table. My fingers hovered over the string for a moment. Then I untied it. Inside was a reel-to-reel tape. No note. Just a small tag clipped to the edge that read, "Play me. Before it's too late." I stared at it, my chest tightening. I hadn't seen one of these since I was a kid. The smell of burnt electronics clung to it, like it had been rescued from a fire. I dusted off my old player, plugged it in, and loaded the reel. The tape hissed, crackled, then rolled. A man's voice came through, calm, precise, and disturbingly familiar. "Hello, John. I've been watching your work. You're thorough. Careful. You think like a skeptic, but you walk like a believer." I stepped back. My mouth had gone dry. The voice continued. "The scene you cleaned today wasn't just a murder. It was a marking. A piece of something greater. A map, if you will. And you, well, you're not just the cleaner this time. You're part of the pattern." I turned off the player. My hands were shaking now. I knew that voice. I couldn't remember from where, but I knew it. The air in the basement shifted. It felt colder, heavier, and then something whispered my name. Not in my ear. From inside the blood vial. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in the dark, replaying the voice over and over again. The part that burned into my skull wasn't the threat. It was the last line. "You were part of this long before you realized. And now it's waking up." I sat in my workshop with the lights off, the tape spinning slowly in the dusty old player I hadn't used in years. The voice wasn't distorted. It wasn't hiding. It spoke like it had known me my whole life. Like it had been waiting. "John Mercer, I know you still keep that little silver crucifix in your glove box. You don't believe in it, but you don't throw it away either. You think it'll save you when bleach and gloves won't." I froze. My eyes darted to the van parked just outside. Glove box. Left side. Silver crucifix. Exactly as he said. The tape hissed softly before the voice continued. "The gate isn't a doorway. It's a choice. It's been opened before. You helped, but you forgot. That's how it works." I paused the tape. My mouth had gone dry. The kind of dry that wasn't thirst, it was dread. I looked around the room, half expecting someone to be watching me. The shadows didn't move. The smell of cleaning chemicals still lingered in the air. Comforting in a way. This was my space. My rules. My tools. And now, this voice had slithered its way into it. I took a breath, restarted the tape. "You want answers about your wife. Claire was special. Not because of what she did, but because of what she was meant to do. She wasn't yours, John. She never was." Click. End of tape. I stared at the spinning reel long after it stopped. The tape had been hand-delivered by a man with no face, no name, and no words. Just a heavy coat, cracked boots, and that damn player set gently on the floor outside my door. I rewound the tape and played it again. Every word hit harder the second time, but one sentence clawed into me more than the others. "She wasn't yours." No, that wasn't just a lie, it was bait. I knew Claire. I knew her better than anyone. Didn't I? I spent the next hour digging through old digital case files, stuff I had quietly copied from police servers over the years. Claire's file. Her birth records. Her school photos. But I couldn't find anything earlier than 2001. That was when she showed up in Detroit. She would have been 15 then. No hospital records. No childhood address. Nothing before that. People don't just start existing at 15. I grabbed a beer, then left it unopened on the counter. Instead, I typed the name from the tape into every database I could access. Adam Voss. There were old mentions, very old. A former seminary priest. Accused of heresy in 1999. Rumors of ritualistic teachings. A small cult. Disappeared after a mysterious fire at a church outside Flint. Declared dead. But a photo from 1998 stopped me cold. He looked the same as the man in the video footage I'd found earlier this week from the orphanage security tapes. No aging. No decay. The same hollow eyes. The same cold expression. I leaned closer to the screen. The man who disappeared over 2 decades ago looked exactly like the man who'd just left me a tape recorded hours ago. I heard a soft creak. My neck stiffened. Behind me, one of the picture frames on the wall had tilted sideways. I hadn't touched it. I walked over slowly, straightened it. My reflection in the glass seemed off, like I was watching myself from somewhere else. Then I saw it. Written behind the glass in dark ink, so faint I almost missed it, were 2 words. He remembers. I staggered back. This wasn't a haunting. This was a hunt. And I wasn't the predator this time. Adam Voss knew things he shouldn't. Things no living man could know. I took my crucifix from the glove box and shoved it into my jacket pocket. Not because I believed, but because something old, something deep in my bones, told me I'd need it soon. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the orphanage. Not as a cleaner, but as a man with a shovel, and questions that could no longer be buried. I didn't sleep the night after the tape. I just sat there, lights off, staring at the spot where the reel stopped spinning. The voice on that tape, it knew things. Things I never told anyone. About the fire. About Claire. About the scars no autopsy ever explained. The coffee was stale by morning, but I drank it anyway. Bitterness felt honest. I drove to the warehouse district, to the locker I swore I'd never open again. Locker 317. I'd kept it locked for 11 years, buried under boxes of old chemicals, tarps, and paperwork the city forgot to file. But behind it all, in a dented steel case lined with black velvet, were the files from the St. Mark job. The first time I touched them, I had just finished a rookie cleanup. A double murder in a church, messy but not strange. At least, that's what I thought back then. But something in the report caught my eye, even back then. The description of the burns. The photos of the victim's eyes, charred from within. It didn't feel right. Felt staged. Today, reading it again with different eyes, the details hit harder. Victim male 45, name redacted. Time of death, 3:33 a.m. Scene, altar room at St. Mark's Cathedral. Notes, blood trails lead in circles around the pulpit. No forced entry. Victim's eyes exploded. No signs of blunt trauma. No screams reported. But that wasn't what stopped my breath. It was the 3rd photo, tucked between pages like someone didn't want it found. A photo of the far wall. On it, burned into brick, was a symbol. A spiral inside a triangle. A perfect match to what I'd found at the orphanage 2 nights ago. I ran my fingers over the grainy photo. Even through the plastic sleeve, I could feel the ridges of soot in my imagination. That same symbol had appeared in my dreams lately, glowing faint red, pulsing like a heartbeat. I flipped to the scene sketch. Handwritten notes along the border read, similar to the apartment fire, 2012, see Mercer case. I froze. That was my case. Claire's case. I dropped the file and leaned back against the cold wall of the locker. My mouth felt dry. They had connected it. Someone, before I even realized it myself, had drawn a line between Claire's death and St. Mark's. But I was never told. The files were sealed. Redacted. Buried. And I had buried her with lies. She died in a fire. That's what I told myself. A gas leak, faulty wiring, a city too poor to care. But now the dots were connecting in shapes I never dared to trace. I pulled out the final report, sealed in an envelope with my own name on it. It hadn't been opened. Not even by me. Inside was a note. Not typed. Written in black ink, shaky handwriting. She was the first gate. You were the key. You always were. No signature. I stared at the words for a long time. What the hell does that mean? I didn't know who wrote it. But someone had left it here for me. Someone who knew I'd come back eventually. I left the storage unit with the file tucked under my arm and a storm pounding in my chest. The sun was out, but it didn't warm anything. Everything felt colder now, my hands, my memories, my thoughts. In the side mirror of my truck, I swore I saw something move in the back seat. Just for a second. A flicker. A face. Her face. Claire. But when I turned, there was nothing. Just an empty seat and the old scent of cleaning fluid. I gripped the wheel and started the engine. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. St. Mark was just one piece of the puzzle. And the picture it was forming? It wasn't human. I've cleaned more blood than I care to remember. Human mostly. Sometimes animal. Once, I swear, it wasn't either. But never, never, have I heard a voice come from a bucket of bleach. It started like any other job. The site was an old synagogue on Jefferson Avenue, closed down in the 80s. Since then, it had become a canvas for graffiti, a hideout for junkies, and apparently a place to die. The call came through early in the morning. Unmarked body found, skinned from the shoulders down. Blood everywhere, but no footprints. No drag marks. Just the body, sitting in the front row like it was praying. The police cleared out quick. Too quick. That's when they called me. I arrived just after sunrise. The sky was a dull orange, like it had bled through the clouds overnight. The synagogue's front doors were half-rotten and swung open with a long groan. Inside, dust floated in beams of light cutting through the broken stained glass. The air was thick with copper and mildew. I put on my gloves, mask, and gear. Standard stuff. Laid out my bottles. Bleach, ammonia, neutralizers, enzyme foam. Everything to erase what people shouldn't see. I found the body exactly where they said. Seated on a broken pew, head bowed, hands folded. Or what was left of the hands. Skin peeled clean off. Eyes removed with surgical precision. No blood trail. No defensive wounds. Just ritual carvings scorched into the wood around it. Symbols I'd started to see too often lately. I began with the bleach. I poured it over the blood pooled on the floor, then dipped my sponge in and started scrubbing. The bleach bubbled like always, but the sound changed. It didn't hiss. It whispered. I froze. The room was silent. No traffic outside. No wind. But I heard it again, soft and close, like someone breathing in my ear. John. I spun around. No one. The bleach still foamed in its bucket, but now it smelled different, less chemical, more like burning paper and old perfume. The kind Claire used to wear. I took off my mask, heart pounding. Leaned in. John, help me. I backed away fast, knocking over the bucket. Bleach splashed across the floor, hitting one of the symbols carved into the wood. It hissed, loudly this time, and then caught fire. Not smoke. Not sparks. Actual fire. The sigil lit up like it had been soaked in gasoline, lines of orange light crawling along the wood in a perfect pattern. But the fire didn't spread. It danced along the symbol, then vanished, leaving behind blackened grooves and the smell of roses. Claire's scent. I dropped to my knees. My gloves were gone. I hadn't realized I'd taken them off. My hands trembled as I reached out, touching the place where the flames had burned. The wood was cold. Then I heard it again. Help me, John. I'm not dead. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was clear. Desperate. Claire's voice. I stared into the pool of bleach as it settled, my reflection warping in the ripples. But it wasn't just my face staring back. Hers was beside mine. Eyes wide. Lips moving. No sound. I fell back, scrambling across the blood-stained floor. The image vanished the second I looked away. I felt sick, my stomach twisting with panic and confusion. This wasn't grief. This wasn't trauma. This was real. She was reaching out. From somewhere. And whatever had killed the man on the pew had left that door open. I didn't finish the job. I left the bleach, the rags, even my gear. Walked out into the daylight with the smell of roses still in my lungs. I didn't even realize I was bleeding until I got home. A line had been cut into my forearm, thin, neat, and fresh. The same symbol from the floor. I didn't remember being touched. But something had marked me. And now, Claire's voice wouldn't stop. Not when I closed my eyes. Not when I turned on the TV to drown it out. Not even when I slept. She kept saying the same thing. You're getting close, John. But he's watching. He knows you're awake. And he won't let you find me again. Not without blood. Not without pain. Not without change. The mental hospital was nothing like I expected. The building itself looked like it had been swallowed by the city, a decaying skeleton of cracked windows and rusted bars. I stood outside for a long moment, watching the flickering lights behind grimy glass. The air smelled like antiseptic mixed with old smoke and something else I couldn't place. Fear, maybe. Or something worse. Inside, the halls were narrow and smelled of stale sweat and despair. I followed the nurse's silent instructions, feeling the weight of every step, like I was walking deeper into a trap. The man they called Father Daniels was in a small, padded room at the end of a crooked hallway. His eyes were sunken, wild, but there was a flicker of recognition when I introduced myself. He didn't speak at first. Just stared at the wall, trembling. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he said my name. "You're too late, Mercer," he said. "He's coming." I tried to ask who he was, but the words barely made it past my lips before the man convulsed violently. Before I could react, flames burst from his body, bright, unnatural fire that made the walls scream. I froze, unable to move, as the nurse screamed and the fire swallowed him whole. When the flames died, all that was left was a scorched outline, like a burned imprint on the mattress. A cold wind swept through the room, and I saw a figure in the doorway. Adam Voss. Calm. Smiling. He didn't say a word. His eyes held something ancient and terrible, something that knew every secret, every weakness. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to obey. He stepped forward slowly, as if the fire had never touched him. And then he vanished like smoke, leaving only the faint smell of sulfur behind. I left that place shaken, clutching the memories of a dying man's last warning, and a glimpse of the demon who haunted my every step. The line between reality and nightmare was thinner than I'd ever imagined, and I was standing right on it. I don't remember the drive back to the office. The roads were wet, but the sky was clear. That kind of weather always made me uneasy. Like the rain had come from somewhere else, somewhere it shouldn't have. I locked the van, walked inside, and went straight to the metal cabinet where I keep all my restricted records. The cabinet's dented, rusted at the corners, and always smells like vinegar and bleach. But it holds the kind of files that aren't supposed to exist. Files that someone paid to bury. I flipped through the tabs until I found the one labeled Claire Whitlock, orphan status. My wife. Dead 11 years now. The fire that took her still felt fresh in my bones. But today I'd seen her as a child, alive and unburned, in a photo that shouldn't exist. I laid the file open on my desk. Most of it was redacted. Names blacked out. Dates scratched over. But one thing hadn't been erased. St. Elias Orphanage. East Detroit. The same building where I'd cleaned that blood-drenched ritual last week. The same building where candles still burned and blood refused to fade. I stared at the photo again. The girl in the front row, maybe 12, was Claire. No doubt about it. I'd memorized that face long ago. But in the photo, she was smiling. Standing beside her was a taller figure. Thin, dressed in priest's robes. Pale skin. Shadowed eyes. And even though the photo was nearly 2 decades old, I recognized him too. Adam Voss. Uniged. The file held more letters from the church, mentions of spiritual experiments, coded language about test groups and rites of passage. It made me sick. Had she known? Had Claire remembered all of this and never told me? Or was her mind just as tampered with as the reports in front of me? I leaned back in my chair. The office was quiet except for the soft buzz of the ceiling light. I didn't realize I was gripping the edges of the desk until I felt a warm trickle slide down my palm. My fingernails had broken the skin. I got up, wiped my hand, and grabbed the keys. There was one place left to check. St. Elias was worse at night. The place had been condemned for years, but that didn't stop addicts, cult freaks, or things far worse from squatting there. I parked across the street. No cars. No signs of life. Just wind. The door creaked open with a groan, like the building itself was tired. I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled like old wood, mildew, and something metallic, like pennies soaked in vinegar. My flashlight cut across peeling wallpaper and broken religious paintings. Then I heard it. Laughter. A little girl's laughter, coming from below. The basement. I should have left. Should have called backup, or the church, or someone with holy water and a death wish. But my legs moved anyway. Step by step, down the narrow stairs into the dark. The deeper I went, the colder it got. My breath started to fog. The light from the flashlight trembled, not because the batteries were low, but because my hands were. The basement was bigger than I remembered. Or maybe I'd never seen all of it before. At the far end was a door I'd never noticed. Thick. Iron. Sealed with chains. And behind it, chanting. I didn't think. I just acted. I cut the chains with bolt cutters I'd kept in my duffel. It took effort. My arms were numb by the time the last one snapped. The door creaked open. Inside was a room lit with candles, perfectly placed in a circle. The walls were covered in charcoal markings, old and precise. In the center of the circle stood a wooden chair. Shackles at the arms and legs, burn marks on the seat, and nailed to the wall behind it, a videotape. I approached, reached out, and took it down. It was labeled, in careful handwriting, Trial for Claire W., The Binding. My heart stopped. My wife hadn't just been there. She'd been used. Or worse, she'd participated. I didn't breathe until I was back in the van. The tape sat on the passenger seat, like a brick made of truth. I stared at it for a long time. The thought of watching it made my chest tighten. But I knew I had to. I needed to see what they did to her, or what she did to them. The truth was waiting inside that tape, and something told me I wouldn't like what I found. But I'd already gone too far. There was no cleaning this mess. Not anymore. Not ever. The map lay sprawled across my kitchen table, stained with black coffee and something darker, something from a scene I couldn't scrub clean. Red pins. 13 of them. Each marked a place I had been sent to clean in the last 3 months. Churches, orphanages, shrines, even a drained baptismal pool at an old hospital. All of them abandoned. All of them soaked in blood. I stared at the pattern for hours. Then I saw it. Not just a circle, an inverted pentagram, wide as the east side of Detroit. Every pin sat at a point or intersection. At the center, the Church of St. Elijah, burned down in 1994. The same year Claire told me she'd stopped believing in God. I grabbed a black marker and began connecting the dots. Each line felt like a bone snapping back into place. I didn't want it to make sense, but it did. Too perfectly. This wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration. And I was the damn conductor without knowing it. I leaned back in my chair. My arm throbbed, right where the last sigil had burned itself into my skin. It hadn't faded. In fact, it had started glowing faintly under certain light, like an animal reacting to moonlight. When I looked at it long enough, I swore I could hear whispering beneath my skin. That night, I broke my own rule, never revisit a site. But I had to go back to St. Mary's, the church where I first heard her voice in the bleach. The front doors groaned as I pushed them open. The city had forgotten this place, but it hadn't forgotten me. Candles still stood where I left them, half melted, puddles of red wax like blood on stone. The pews were empty except for dust and feathers. A crow had died in the rafters. Or maybe it was something pretending to be a crow. I walked down the aisle slowly, like a groom returning to an altar long after the bride had left. Then I saw it. A new symbol. Etched into the pulpit. Not carved grown. Flesh-like. Wet. Pulsing. I stepped closer. It was the same symbol from the map's center. The one connected to St. Elijah's ruins. And suddenly it hit me. I hadn't been cleaning crime scenes. I'd been activating them. Every wipe of bleach, every sweep of ash, removing protection, not corruption. I was stripping away the spiritual bandages left behind by desperate priests and wardens. Adam had used me to unbind them all. I collapsed against the pew. How much of this had Claire known? Was I the final piece in something she started? I opened my duffel bag and pulled out the tape recorder again. I hadn't planned to listen to Adam's voice again, but I needed to. Maybe I missed something. I hit play. Adam's voice came through, calm as always. Almost bored. Do you see it now, John? You were never the investigator. You were the instrument. Every circle needs a hand to draw it. Every gate needs a key. And every key must bleed. The tape clicked. I sat in silence. Then I looked at my hand. The veins were darker than they'd been yesterday. And I realized something else, something cold. I hadn't cut myself lately, but my fingers had started to smell like iron. Outside the church, the wind had changed. Not blowing. Breathing. I walked out into the night. And somewhere beneath my feet, something turned over in its sleep. Waiting. Counting. One more sight. One more thread. And the gate would open. And I was starting to wonder if I even wanted to stop it. Because part of me, deep buried, wanted to see what was on the other side. Just once. Before the world ended. Or became something else. The murders, the ones I had cleaned, scrubbed, and cataloged, they made a perfect circle. The center of it all sat just south of Detroit, buried beneath the dead city like a secret that didn't want to be found. An old salt mine, sealed off since the 70s after a collapse buried 12 workers alive. But the gate Adam spoke of, it was never about metaphors. It was real. And it was here. I parked the van at the edge of a broken fence. My boots crunched over gravel and rusted metal, the wind screaming through hollow shafts like voices that didn't know they were dead yet. I gripped my bag, full of silver shavings, accelerants, and a small vial of holy water. Useless on their own. Maybe useful together. Or maybe I was just pretending I had a plan. I found the entrance where the concrete had cracked open, like the earth itself couldn't keep this place buried anymore. The air that blew from below was cold but wrong, like meat left too long in a freezer. I climbed down slowly, using an old ladder welded into the side of the shaft. Each step groaned, like it knew where I was going. About 50 feet down, the metal ended, but the stone corridor kept going. carved. Not by machines. By hands. And not human ones. The tunnel pulsed. Not just with sound, but with breath. Like the whole place was alive and waiting. I followed the smell of blood and fire. My flashlight flickered with every few steps, and I knew better than to think it was the batteries. Symbols lined the walls, deeper than paint. Carved. Scarred. Burned. I recognized one from the orphanage. Another from the synagogue. Every murder was here, like pieces of a broken puzzle finally assembled. Then I heard the chanting. Soft at first. Echoing. But layered, like 100 mouths speaking one word at the same time, over and over. A name. Ishzariel. I stepped into the ritual chamber. It was massive, at least the size of a cathedral, but hollowed from stone. Salt crystals shimmered faintly along the ceiling, catching the light of dozens of candles placed in a perfect spiral. And in the center, Adam Voss. He stood shirtless, his arms outstretched, his skin marked in black ink that moved like it had a pulse. Around him, 7 bodies floated above the ground, limbs stretched unnaturally, mouths sewn shut, blood dripping upward into a swirling mist above them. He didn't look surprised to see me. "John," he said calmly, as if I had just walked into a living room. Right on time. I raised my hand, holding a silver shard between my fingers. It was shaking, or maybe I was. "What is this?" I asked. "A gift," he said, smiling. "You've cleaned the circle, sealed the wounds. All we needed was the heart." He pointed to me. "You were the final key. Claire chose well." Her name hit me like a knife. She was a victim. Adam tilted his head. "No. She was a doorway. One made of love, pain, and fire. She opened you." I stepped closer. "Where is she?" He smiled wider. "Inside the gate. Waiting. You want to see her again, don't you?" I hesitated. The spiral of candles flared with a sudden gust of heat, and the floating bodies began to spin slowly, like planets caught in a silent orbit. I looked at my hand, still shaking. But then I saw it. One of the bodies, a woman. Black hair. Burn scar on her wrist. Claire. "She's not dead," I whispered. "Not yet," Adam said. "But the transformation requires your choice. Sacrifice yourself, and she lives. Refuse, and she screams forever." He stepped toward me, the veins on his neck pulsing with black light. "You've seen the world, John. You know what hides behind the veil. The gods are old, but forgotten. This is the new age. Blood. Binding. Truth." I dropped the silver. His eyes lit up. Literally, flames flickered inside them. But he didn't see my other hand. The small pouch of accelerant had already been leaking onto the salt. The silver was laced with magnesium. The fire would rise fast. I struck the lighter. His face twisted, not in fear. In betrayal. "Cleaner," I said, and through the flame. The floor erupted in white-blue fire. The candles screamed as they melted. The floating bodies dropped like meat. Adam howled, his flesh cracking as the gate behind him began to split wide, bones forming the arch, stitched with sinew and light. He lunged at me. I grabbed him and pushed. We both fell. Through the gate. Into whatever waited on the other side. I never believed in hell. Not really. Not until I saw it breathing. The salt mine was a wound in the earth, carved deep beneath Detroit, like a secret the city didn't want to remember. The air inside was cold, stale, and thick with ancient dust. My boots echoed against the salt-coated floor as I moved through narrow tunnels, light flickering from the flashlight strapped to my chest. My heart beat like a war drum. I could feel it in my throat, in my skull. Every step I took, I thought I heard whispers behind me. Names. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. All of them felt like they belonged to people who should be dead. I followed the trail of symbols, painted in what I didn't want to admit was blood. The lines stretched along the tunnel walls, drawn with impossible precision. I passed bones embedded in the salt, some gnawed on, some cracked open like someone was digging for marrow. Then I found the door. Rusty, half-rotted, and covered in a pulsating membrane that stretched and twitched like it was alive. I pressed my palm to it, and it opened, not with a creak but a sigh. Warm air poured out, thick and wet. I stepped inside. The ritual chamber was massive, an ancient salt cavern lit by dozens of black candles that gave off no real light. The flames flickered blue, and the shadows they cast moved like they had minds of their own. Chains hung from the ceiling. People dangled from them, motionless. Some had their mouths sewn shut. Others had their eyes gouged out. Their skin had sigils carved into them. Each one was positioned perfectly, forming a larger symbol I recognized from the orphanage. He was standing at the center of it all. Adam. His arms were outstretched, his head tilted back like he was basking in something only he could feel. He wore a long coat soaked in blood. His face hadn't aged a day. Not since the recording. Not since the photo. Not since Claire. "You're just in time," he said without turning. "She's been waiting for you." I should have shot him right there. I really should have. But my hands were shaking too hard. He finally turned to face me. His eyes weren't eyes. They were pits, bottomless, black, and full of movement. Something swam behind them. Something that looked back. "Do you know what you are, John?" he said gently. "You're not just her husband. You're her anchor." The ritual needed a bond, one strong enough to pierce the veil. That's why she was made for you. That's why she loved you. She wasn't made, I snapped. She was real. Adam smiled like I was a child who didn't understand how clocks worked. "You want her back?" he asked. "You want to see her again? Help me finish this. Just one word from you, and the gate opens. You walk through, you bring her out. You could save her. You could bring her home." I stepped closer, pulled the detonator from my pocket. My thumb hovered over the trigger, but I hesitated. "What's behind the gate, Adam?" He stepped forward, his voice a whisper now. "Everything. Truth. Freedom. Power. And her. And what's the cost?" He grinned. "You." The room trembled. The chains rattled. The sigils on the floor started to glow. A hole began to form in the center of the ritual, a swirling pit of flesh and flame, breathing like a mouth gasping for air. The flesh gate. I took a deep breath and let the thought of her go. Then I threw the silver dust grenade into the pit. Adam screamed. Not in fear, but in rage. "You fool! You don't know what you've done." I tackled him as the grenade exploded. Light. Heat. Sound like metal screaming. We hit the ground hard. He was on top of me, claws where his fingers should have been. His face was melting, reshaping, stretching into something that had never been human. I stabbed him in the neck with the vial of holy water I kept around my neck. His skin hissed. He shrieked. The gate was pulling everything toward it now. Air, light, the bodies from the chains. Even me. I looked at the detonator. Cracked, blinking red. One last charge. I smiled, blood in my teeth. "Tell Claire. I found her." Then I leapt into the gate. And everything went dark. Not like sleep. Not like death. Something worse. Something alive. And then, I heard her voice. "John?" They sent me to the orphanage on a Thursday morning. The sky hung low over Detroit, thick with gray clouds, like it hadn't made up its mind whether to rain, or just press down and smother everything. I drove in silence, the city passing me by like a ghost. I didn't bother with the radio. There's something about death scenes that makes noise feel disrespectful. I'm Elise Grant. 29. 3 years in the field, second year on Occult Division. Yeah, it's a thing now. They call us environmental trauma technicians on paper, but everyone just says cleaners. The job today. Scene 412D, abandoned Catholic orphanage. Third body this month found in these types of places. This one was unique though, no corpse recovered. Just blood. A lot of it. I parked across the street. The building loomed above, rotten and crumbling, its windows like hollow eyes. Vines crawled up its face like veins. A broken statue of Mary stood by the entrance, her face weathered smooth. Even she looked tired of watching. I keyed in through the side door. The hallway reeked of mildew and something older, something sweet and sour and thick. The kind of smell you can't scrub out, no matter how much bleach you use. I flicked on my shoulder light and stepped into the main corridor. The walls were covered in old children's drawings. Smiling suns. Stick figure families. But most were defaced, scratched out or burned at the edges. One had a horned figure in red crayon, grinning with teeth too sharp. The work order said the blood was found in the chapel, second floor. I took the stairs carefully. Each step groaned like it was remembering something painful. When I reached the chapel, the doors were already open. Inside, dust floated in thick beams of light through shattered stained glass. It was quiet, unnaturally quiet. Then I saw it. The blood wasn't pooled like you'd expect. It was drawn, shapes and spirals on the floor, perfect and deliberate, like a painter with a steady hand. And in the center, a black scorch mark in the shape of a human body. Arms out, legs slightly apart. I pulled out my tools and stepped forward, kneeling beside the mark. That's when I saw the glove. It was half melted into the wooden floor, but the name tag stitched across the wrist was still visible. Mercer. I frowned. That name rang a bell. I'd heard it whispered during training. Stories passed between veterans. John Mercer, the guy who cleaned the worst of the worst. Some say he went rogue. Others said he'd vanished. But seeing his name here, like this, it made my stomach twist. I took out my camera and snapped a few photos for the file. The lens glitched, flickered. For a moment, the shape on the floor shifted in the viewfinder. It looked like the shadow stood up, arms moving, head tilting toward me. I blinked, lowered the camera. Nothing there. Just the mark. I started my scan for chemical traces. Nothing showed up on the usual tests. No hemoglobin, no decay indicators. It was like the blood wasn't even organic. And yet, the scent of iron was strong. I glanced around the room. That's when I saw the mirror. It stood in the corner, cracked and leaning against the wall. I hadn't noticed it before. I slowly approached. My reflection looked back. Pale face. Dark circles. Just me. But then I saw him. Behind me. A man tall, lean, with soot-black skin like coal and eyes like burned-out stars. Not glowing. Just hollow. Like all the light had been pulled in and crushed. I spun around. No one. I turned back to the mirror. Now it was just me again. But my reflection, it didn't move. Not right away. It smiled before I did. I backed away, heart hammering, pulse roaring in my ears. Something about this place was wrong. Wrong in a way I couldn't explain. The air here wasn't just heavy, it was waiting. Watching. I looked down again at the melted glove. Mercer had been here. That much was certain. But the report said no body was ever found. And now, something tells me he never left. I packed my things and radioed in, voice trembling slightly. Scene 412, deprocessed. Marked for deeper analysis. Requesting a priest. Static. Then a whisper came through. Just one word. Elise. I froze. Nobody knew my name. Not on that channel. Not unless something was still listening. I turned to the mirror one last time. This time there were two of me. But only one looked alive. I woke up in a white room. At least, it looked white at first. The ceiling above me flickered like a faulty bulb, but there were no lights. The walls pulsed, soft, like skin stretched too tight. I could hear something behind them. Breathing. My mouth was dry. My body felt weightless and heavy at the same time, like I'd been floating in glue. I tried to move, and every joint popped like branches snapping. My throat burned. I coughed, and something black hit the floor. It hissed. The bed I was on wasn't made of fabric or metal. It was warm. Breathing. I rolled off it quickly and hit the floor hard. The tiles weren't cold. They were warm too. Wet. I stood up, dizzy, and looked around. No windows. No doors. No machines. Just walls. And in one corner, what looked like a mirror. I limped toward it. The closer I got, the more it shimmered like water. My reflection was slow to catch up. And when it did, I wished it hadn't. That man in the mirror wasn't me. Not exactly. His eyes were black, deep and hollow, like they didn't end. His skin looked like mine, but it pulsed with dark veins under the surface, like worms shifting beneath glass. I opened my mouth. He did too. But his smile was wrong. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Slow. Wet. I turned. Nothing. The mirror, though, now showed something standing behind me. A tall figure. No face. Just a shape, long arms, stretched fingers. Its hand was on my shoulder. But I didn't feel it. Then it spoke, not from its mouth. From inside me. Welcome back, John. I backed away. My reflection didn't. What is this place? I asked aloud, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. The walls pulsed again. A heartbeat. Not mine. You chose to enter the gate, the voice said. Now you understand. You never destroyed it. You became part of it. Memories crashed into me. The salt mine. The ritual. Adam's laughter as the flesh opened. Claire's scream. My body falling through the gate. The explosion. I stopped him, I said, almost begging. I stopped him. I blew it all up. No, the voice said, calm and cruel. You completed what he started. You became what he could not. That was always the purpose. Not to open the gate. To feed it. I shook my head. Where's Claire? Silence. Then her voice. Gentle. Close. John. I turned. She was there. Standing. Eyes full of tears. Wearing the same dress from the night she died. She looked so human. So real. I ran to her. I touched her face. It was warm. I don't understand, I whispered. You were never supposed to, she said. They didn't want to kill you. They wanted to change you. You're the bridge now. The bridge to what? I asked. She stepped back. Her smile cracked. Her face split at the mouth, revealing rows of teeth like needles. Her skin peeled back like paper. Her eyes bled black. To everything else, she said with a voice that wasn't hers. The room collapsed. Not fell apart, collapsed. The walls folded in like they were never there. Light poured through cracks in the sky above me. Red light. Screams rode the wind. I dropped to my knees. And then, I understood. I hadn't come back to life. I'd come back through